Hello and welcome to Unregulated Leadership. My name is Lavonya Douglas and I'm one of your hosts. And we also have Miriam Opa, who is here to introduce our guest.
Hello, everyone. This is Janisha Metcalf. She is a Jedi, a community organizer here in New York City. She's a professor at Fordham University, and she also has her own community-based organization, a nonprofit that I hope we get time to talk about. She does all things good for the people here in Harlem, and it's just really a pleasure to have you here and that we get to sit down and really talk about you and your work. So thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for coming. So the first question that we have for you is we would like you to tell us about yourself and your current career.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Good to be here. I tell people I'm a social impact strategist because it's all encompassing. So I'm a fundraiser, I write grants, I do corporate partnerships, campaign management work. Really, my goal and mission is to help institutions and companies think critically about how to leverage their resources to serve marginalized communities, primarily Black communities, working with young people who are high potential, low income. That's really been the crux of my work for the past 15 years. I started out as a social worker in the South Bronx and realized very quickly that clinical services and that aspect of the work was just one part of it. We still needed to make sure that we were getting companies and celebrities and other institutions involved in community work. So that's what I've been doing in various capacities. I've worked in tech and higher ed and nonprofit development. So it really, to me, isn't about fixating on one specific title. I think sometimes we get very caught up in titles, but it's social impact at large is really the sort of mission driven career that I've been trying to carve out for myself.
I love the title. I know you just said we get caught up on titles, but the word itself, impact, right, means it doesn't matter what you do, what arenas you're in, like you're there to make an impact on the people that you are servicing. So I don't get hung up on titles either, but I love that one.
Yeah, I was just thinking about high potential and low income, and how many of our the people that we meet, and one of our recent interviewees talked about how he had high potential, Dennis Morgan, but it was just a low impact, right? He not low impact, low income. He didn't have much exposure, and so being able to recognize and leads me to my next question for you. Being a strategist, what skills do you need to have or develop to be able to recognize high potential? I mean, we can always see what the low income is, but high potential in anyone.
Yeah, no, I love this question because I notice I didn't say high academic achieving, right? Like it's high potential in a number of ways. If you look at our economy, if you look at our world, things are ever evolving. So when we talk about particularly high potential youth, it's youth who have the capacity to absorb their environment, what's going on, and make something out of it, whether it's creatively, using social media, academically, getting accepted into prestigious institutions, or even just the skills that they may need to survive in their neighborhood and doing that on a day-to-day basis, right? We see young people every day, and primarily throughout my career, I've worked with 14 to 25-year-olds on what's the next step for them. And I have been fortunate to work with young people in a variety of capacities and be able to see that potential up close, just in how they respond to things, how they navigate certain challenges, the creativity that they bring. So those are the things that, we really focus in on and think about when we're designing programs. We just launched a program a couple years ago called Successful Steps. And that program was primarily serving youth in the Bronx, parts of Harlem and throughout New York City that just needed additional assistance to get to and through college. So maybe you got accepted into school, but you're the oldest in a family of 3 and you have to watch a younger sibling, so that's high potential, but there's an economic barrier that is preventing you from your next step. Or first generation college students that we work with whose parents, English is not their first language. There's a lot of fear around filling out financial aid documents and any sort of documentation that, might not, that might be difficult for their families to understand is actually helpful and not harmful to them in terms of, risk of deportation or other things that they may be facing or experiencing. Having those students have access to other services, whether it's mental health services, food pantry, job training for their parents, like those are the barriers that we've been helping to remove. And then when I think about younger students, it's about exposure. So if you take a young person who is spending 5 to 7 hours a day on TikTok, creating, videos and absorbing content, and you introduce them to someone who is a professional content creator who makes 6 figures creating content, and have them assess what that young person is doing, right? Because I, as a parent, I'm like, turn the device off, no screen time. What are you doing? But you actually sit them with someone, from the Instagram team or TikTok or wherever the person works, and they're like, oh, they actually have mastered these 3 skills that are pretty important in in being a branding and marketing manager or being a content creator. So I think that social capital piece is a big part of it. The assessment piece is a big part of it too. Is sometimes, I would say actually most of the time, my job is just around observing, listening, and connecting, right? Like what's going on in the space that is happening professionally. So whether I'm at an Afrotech or, any other kind of conference, I'm listening to what they're looking for, then coming back to the community and seeing what young people are talking about and making those connections.
I'm seeing all these different things that you're doing as you're talking. But I want to rewind for a second.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go
because
back.
I want to know, how did you even start? Like what did you find within yourself? You said that you started in social work and then kind of moved into these arenas, right? Like, so you had to identify your target population. You had to, you have the students, you have the parents that you're impacting. But how did this all start? Did it start with a vision? Did it start with situation happen where you like, I want to transition this? What happened? How did you get started in even starting to impact the community that you're servicing now?
Yeah, it's a great question, because corporate social responsibility in the last 10 to 15 years has evolved in such an important way that now you have coursework in things that I'm self-taught in, because it just did not exist, right? Or the conversation has shifted. There were not diversity, equity, and inclusion courses when I was in college. Like that just wasn't a focus area. We had African American studies and things like that. You could learn about populations, but it wasn't contextualized to talk about, let's look at the impact of Black fundraisers in a predominantly white philanthropic space. That conversation was certainly not happening 15 years ago when I was starting my journey, or at least if it was happening, it wasn't accessible to me, right? You have to understand accessibility, because maybe it was happening in some small space in some institution that I wasn't a part of those conversations. It wasn't publicly accessible. Like you see things on LinkedIn or, people are on Facebook Live and doing all sorts of conversations that are open source, think like a Coursera. So I share that because as I was growing my professional journey and having my own aha moments that were like, oh, I want to do that, the market was shifting as well. So when I first got into my social work program, at Fordham University in 2014, for example, the language even around what my degree was called was shifting. So it became macro practice leadership, advanced macro practice with organizations and communities, to the point where I actually ended up designing a course a few years ago because it was constantly evolving. So I think what I've seen is I could identify what the gaps were, and I worked in various parts of the ecosystem. So I worked with the community members, right? Like as a direct practice social worker. So I understood the need. I worked with the development teams because I was on the development team at City Year New York, understanding what does it mean to raise $2 million out of a $13 million budget with corporate sponsors. What are they looking for out of it? And then the final piece is I grew up as a recipient of a lot of these services. Like I grew up in Brooklyn, in East New York, and in the 80s and 90s, understanding from a consumer standpoint of what is it like to be high potential and low income. What does it mean to be in a gifted and talented school where you are surrounded by people who understand and celebrate your genius and hold you accountable to a high standard, but you still are in a very dire economic situation to the point where there's a 13% chance of going to college in the zip code that I'm from, 1120. Wow. Right? Like, so those are the odds, and that's real. Like, we have to, I know I'm kind of jumping, but I think this point is important. We have to stop pretending that young people's ambition and ambition alone are enough to get them out of chronic poverty, deep systemic racism, and deep politically entrenched decisions that are made on their behalf every day that have nothing to do with them, right? So when we talk about high potential, low income, that means I might have straight A's, but I'm in a Title I underfunded school. And so as an individual, I'm doing the best I can and everything I can. But until the adults move some of those systemic barriers away, I'm still only going to go but so far, or I'm going to get very far, but it's going to be an uphill battle constantly. So when I started thinking about how can I go from micro, which is me and one client or 10 clients that I work with clinically, to macro, which is writing a $13 million grant for the Raise the Age program to decriminalize 16 and 17-year-olds that were being incarcerated after Khalif Browder died. And we understood this is systemic, right? Like, he should have never been in jail. He should have never undergone the serious trauma that he went through when he was in Rikers, right? Like, that was not on him. That was on us as a system and a society of adults. Mm-hmm. So my entire career trajectory has been, if I can do this with one person and be effective, what do I need to do to make this process more efficient and better for first hundreds of people, then thousands of people, then millions of people? So that's like my entire career.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
That needs to be like just everything at the beginning of this. I think that's what many in my degree in org psych, we look at the micro and do it to macro. And if you're effective with one, which is perfect, how can then I expand my influence and impact? And so this goes to the next question, the challenges. And I know you faced many challenges anytime we're dealing with the political, academic things that a lot of it is entrenched by politics and by the rich and by people who have no understanding of the needs of the poor. very little understanding of the needs of the poor. The challenges that you face, what skill sets do you need as a leader to deal with the highs and lows of your profession? And then, we talk about, I also want to know what keeps you going, what motivates you.
Yeah. I'll share two challenges that I think are that I've experienced, throughout my career. I think the first is the information gap between community members, between elected officials, right? Like there's a communication gap, there's a lived experience gap where I'm constantly translating. Like translation is the skill. So when I was on the CEC, the Community Education Council for District 3, a big part of what I would do is listen to what parents on, in the Upper West Side or in other parts of the district who are not Harlem parents would say, and really have to humanize the perspective of, you're talking about someone's child. Like you're saying, I don't want my kids to go to that school with those people. You were talking about someone's child. When you sit down and you remove the numbers and you think about someone gave birth to this person, someone held this person, this person brings joy to someone else, no matter what their grades are or, whatever those things are when we remove those barriers. And also just thinking about what is it like for parents to not be able to send their child to school fed with clean clothes. Like we just, the narrative was getting so muddled in those parents aren't doing enough. Like those parents, as if it was this completely, separate thing. So that is a big challenge of just trying to get people to have some empathy and humanize for the experience. And even taking it a step out of CEC, there's so much going on that you have to slow people down and put the information in front of them, right? So how many people know what school they're zoned for if they don't have children? Most people don't care, don't know, are kind of like tuned out to what's going on because there's so much happening. So that second skill of just learning the business and the art of marketing, communication, and storytelling has been huge in my career, right? Because if you're using the wrong method or the wrong narrative around a social issue, people are going to tune you out, right? Like I just had this conversation with a few colleagues where they were going on and on about the defunding of the Department of Education and the schools. And I'm like, it's too heady. Nobody cares about that. I'm not saying it's not true, but that's not the narrative. The narrative is, look, our young people are talented, they're brilliant, they're joyful. If you support X campaign that we have going on, these are the things that we can accomplish. This is what we've accomplished on our own. This is how far we can go, right? This isn't the space for that. Now, if you're at the Hill lobbying, of course, if you got, 15 minutes with the Chancellor, Department of Education, or the mayor's office, of course. Right. But when you are talking to a group of parents and community members and donors, for the most part, they want to understand on a personal level. Hold on. Okay. I'm going to start over. If you are talking to parents, donors, and community members, they want to understand from a person-to-person standpoint, what is my role? What is my money going to do? How can I help? That's why we got Young Gifted Harlem on the side of the school that my children attended, PSIS 180, right? It doesn't say, please give us more money, New York Department of Education. It says Young Gifted in Harlem. And when people ask about it, we talk about the fact that there are no gifted and talented programs above 110th Street in District 3, which means if you are gifted and talented, you have to go downtown. You have to leave your neighborhood. You have to go elsewhere to communicate your brilliance and have your genius acknowledged. So when you get, a huge mural like that people from all over come and take pictures with and look at, it starts a conversation. That's marketing. That's storytelling. That's communication, right? That's not necessarily hardcore social work of, we did a needs assessment and we found the skill gaps that were missing. No, people want to come and take a picture with the mural and say, oh, wait, what school is this? And then go deeper and have the conversation about some of the, inequities and the reason behind it, and, the nod to Nina Simone, and then the conversation is opened up. So I would say those are like the two main things that I've just experienced, widespread is, one, people don't know what they don't know. And two, there's so much going on that you are competing with TikTok, Instagram, CNN, Netflix, Hulu for anyone's attention for anything, social issue or not. So it really does have to be compelling and have a storytelling, aspect to it. I think those are the professional skills that I've acquired, just being a good storyteller and a translator across stakeholders.
Listen, I want to come to New York and just follow you around. Listen,
You do, because I don't know where you're going, but it'll be fun.
Listen, all the different things that you're talking, and as you talk, like, you can hear the passion in your voice. You can hear the creativity and how you're being intentional about how you're moving and bringing awareness to certain spaces. And so I want to ask you, what makes you an unregulated leader? Like, what are the skills that it takes to be in how you see the world and how you interact with people? Because there's not one way, right? And I think when people tap into who they are as a person and their skills, it's what makes them an unregulated leader. So what makes you an unregulated leader?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite unregulated leaders is Shirley Chisholm, and not just because she's a Delta and
from Brooklyn,
and like those are all of the things. But I think what makes me an unregulated leader is I see potential everywhere. And so one of my favorite things about Shirley Chisholm is when she got to the agricultural committee, it was kind of one of those things where it was like, we should go put her over there in a corner and it's agriculture, like whatever. And she was like, watch this SNAP program. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just took something and completely revolutionized how we think about public good and benefits programs nationally, right? Like, not even just in your community, but just by virtue of who you are as a leader trying to get things done for your people and your congressional district, you actually change the face of how we think about benefits programs, right? Like, everyone knows the numbers on SNAP and what it does and how it does it. But I don't think people really understood there was that opportunity coming out of the agricultural committee, right? Like, it was kind of seen as a lesser committee. And so when I think about myself as a leader, like, there have been moments in my career where I'm just like, okay, what am I going to do with this, program that's underfunded? Or what am I going to do with this opportunity that's cool, but a little bit ambiguous in terms of what the scope is and the reach? The last couple of jobs I've had have largely been new jobs, right? Like, I was program manager for the Meta Black Community Nonprofit Fund. It was $20 million investment in 260 Black-led nonprofits in 20 U.S. cities. That program didn't exist before 2021. So there weren't a number of people to go to and say, how do I run this? How do I do that? I think that's what makes you an unregulated leader. Of jumping in and bringing vision and asking questions and challenging people and holding people accountable for a different standard, because you have a vision, right? Your ultimate vision is, I serve people. I move communities forward. I am a collaborator. I'll work with anyone to get things done. If like those are the things that you firmly believe in, you can do that anywhere, you know? So sometimes people will look at my resume and are like, how did you go from foster care to working at Facebook to head of campaigns at Do Something to teaching courses at Fordham to like, you know, to raising $13 million as an independent contractor for various companies doing social impact strategy work. And it's you cannot be afraid, right? Like, what's the worst that can happen? It'll be the way it currently is, you know? So I think that's what I think about when it's like unregulated leaders. These are people who are just bold in their approach and uncompromising in their determination to get things done.
I love that.
Isn't it amazing? I'm from Brooklyn too. So, and Shirley Chisholm has been a secret hero. I mean, because there's been many times, which was one of her quotes, right? If there's no space at the table, bring a folding chair. Where I've looked in at many tables and realized, oh, there's no space for me. I'll sit out, right? Or this is not my space yet, or this is not my time. She created her own space, and and it's very true. Like oftentimes when I see Janisha on the move, I do wish that there was a camera crew around her so that I could like. There needs to be, you know, the real Harlem wife. Because it doesn't get boring. You know, somebody is going to get some knowledge put into them about all of the misconceptions about Harlem students and just students in general, right? When you have a pocket, and Harlem is growing, is definitely gentrified. We have a very diverse group of neighbors who still send their kids south. Like we're comfortable to live here, but you can't get educated here. And so I see Janisha doing her thing. I know that there is going to be something done. Right. Yeah. And it may not be immediate, but something is going to get done. So I appreciate your thought just on what an unregulated leader is, because you definitely represent one of the strongest ones I know thus far.
I appreciate that very much.
What motivates you? You never answered my part two.
Oh, what motivates me? I mean,
you do some tiring work, emotional, psychological, tiring work.
I do. And it's like, well, I'll give you the kind of, I guess like the deeper answer, right? That I don't talk about very much. So a lot of people actually think I'm from Harlem. I'm like, no, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from East New York. But the thing that I think about quite often is my grandmother, Helena Mae Davis. She had a third grade education, but like just was so full of knowledge and wisdom and taught me everything that I know about God and service and how to treat people and how to bring your full self to something, and not just like from a passion perspective, but from a real integrity about how you show up in work ethic. I've never seen anyone, work harder. So that is my motivation, because whenever I, sponsor an event and am fortunate to be in a position where I can do things like sit on boards and be, a major donor and give back and those types of things, she was not regarded as a philanthropist, right? Like her name isn't going to appear, on like the, any major foundations list of great leaders and philanthropists. And it was this quality of being like an unsung, not known person outside of her community, but having done so much is a huge motivator for me, because the bigger my platform gets, the more I do, the more I can bring her name in those spaces, and say like, this is for Helena Mae Davis, because without her, there is no me. So that's like the first, source. And then I think the second one is I'm inspired every day by like seemingly ordinary things, right? So seeing students who are doing papers on their cell phones or parent cell phone because they don't have a computer, that's motivation. Because I'm like, we got to get some money from somewhere. We got to fix this. This ain't it. You know what I mean? And it hits very personally. Like, I remember going to the Chinese restaurant, trading food stamps for money just to not be embarrassed because, that was like a thing. You didn't want to show up to the bodega with this is pre-Ibiza, I'm dating myself. This is when they was, the colored paper. So that's very motivational for me, right? It's like, I don't want people to have to experience that type of deep poverty. I don't want them to have to experience those choices. Although it comes with a whole lot of resilience, it's hard, it's painful. You shouldn't have to live like that when you're a kid. You shouldn't have to make those choices, and think about that. I do a holiday party every year for kids, like the 14th year that we've done it. We give out hundreds of toys, and it's just a day of fun and joy for kids. And the big motivation is I love to see kids being kids. We talk so much about as adults of, what they're not doing and whatever, but it's like, if you have a critique about how young people are behaving, you should think about what you're doing in your life personally that creates space and opportunity for them to experience childhood and joy, right? So what, and I reflect on that a lot as motivation. We took hundreds of people to see Black Panther when it came out, and, rented out the Magic Johnson Theater in Harlem. Why? Because the motivation is, when I think back and remember seeing Wakanda Forever, I will have that as a motivating factor of I saw it with all of these kids and community members and people, and we were able to pay for it. And how do you get to be able to pay for stuff and rent theaters out? You need money. How you need money? You got to go to work. So now I didn't want to go to work, but now I'm going to work because, now we got to buy out the theater for The Little Mermaid or whatever else is next. So the motivation really comes in that way in terms of, just thinking about my family, my upbringing, my history, and also the young people that I see and talk to. Just could be in the street and it's, hey, Skylar's mom, hey, Langston's mom, hey, hey, Miss that does the toy party that I don't remember your name. Like, that's enough for me to make me want to keep doing more and keep going. And I know this is running over, but I have a new source of motivation that I didn't always have is the people who tell me I can't do things. Like, I generally am not that type of person that gets caught up. I'm like, if you say I can't, okay, whatever. But I think what's been happening recently is particularly Black women being undermined in corporate spaces, and then it coming out that they were right. Their ideas, their intuition, their assessments, their perspective, like it was all right, and it's like 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, it's, oh yeah, by the way, soft skills make better leaders. Like, who knew? It's like all the women that told you that this was a thing, So as a consultant, that would happen to me quite frequently where I would be doing trainings and would have a whole curriculum and everyone's like, oh, thank you, this training was wonderful. And there would be a line of Black women of color as well, waiting after to be like, we said that, we told them that, we asked for that, they said no, they said they needed data, they said they needed this. So that becomes a motivating factor, right? If you have the platform, if you have the credential, if you have the credibility to then use that voice and to speak up for all of the people who have said, this is what needs to be done, right? So then it's not Janisha's words. It's really just me speaking out and saying, that data that you asked for, this came from your employees. Like, it makes no sense. Like, you're going to pay me to repeat back to you what all of your employees have said.
For years.
Not turning down no coins, but saying.
Yes. The things that you have described you are currently already making a huge impact on your community, the people that you come in contact with. Um, but as an unregulated leader, we don't stop at the stuff that we're already doing, right? Like there's always more. So
Yeah.
what's next for you? What is the next thing that you're going to do? Where are your visions taking you next? What can we expect to see next for you?
Yeah, no, I love this. I mean, so as a fundraiser, a person who works very much in the numbers, like my next goal is I just celebrated the $15 million mark in terms of dollars raised for organizations that I've worked with. So now I'm like, how do we get to the $20 million mark, right? Like having those conversations with my team around, you know, what's next in terms of social impact strategy and how we show up for people. I think that the other thing that's really important that we haven't really talked about is just quality of life and how you spend your time. You know, in my opinion, freedom isn't about money, it's about choice. So it's about like Mariam knows this. Vacation is my love language. So that's what's next for me is right. Like really having this season where I can travel with my family. I can enjoy, you know, the fruits of my labor and start to think about how to work smarter and not harder, how to build teams. The dream for me and the blessing has been like Metcalf Consulting isn't just me. I've been able to hire 5 people. Like that is important to me, right? Is to, you know, to be a Black led, woman led consulting firm and be able to say that, you know, I've hired 5 people of color to help with this work is deeply important, you know, in terms of helping them for their families and to meet their own goals. So that's always the goal is how can I support other people, whether it's through employment or connecting them to opportunities. Because as I move on to the next thing, there's always space to say, you know, hey, are you free to help me support this social impact project? Hey, are you able to, you know, take on this client by yourself, right? As a senior consultant and I'm principal consultant. So that's really kind of what I have my eye towards next is growing the business and being able to work with some of your favorite brands to do good, right? That's always the goal.
I love that.
Yes. And all of us are moms, what the opportunities that she affords to give her kids now and what she's doing for herself now, which again, growing up where we always had women worked really, really hard and they never were able to celebrate themselves or take that time off that they needed. They had to wait to retirement or they had to wait until government gave them back something. Janisha's doing everything what people hope to do when they're in their 50s and 60s and they shouldn't have to at this moment. And she gives it to her kids now, right? So them swimming, snorkeling. I mean, I've heard all of the stories when I see her kids come back from vacation. So I knew they went someplace, but it is very refreshing to see them making things happen now. And it's not now. It's not a not now situation, right? It's going to come. Now she makes it happen now. And she's building it up so that they don't have to wait 5-10 years to experience life. And that's notable, right? For hardworking women, moms, you know, our loves are our children. And they now see, you know, my mom can be happy and take care of herself, take care of us, and still have an impact in the community in which she lives. So, it's brilliant and it's bravo. Thank you so much. We're going to probably promote this on, kind of include this, but her and her husband, which I am going to call him, are doing the business of marriage. They actually are going to do the business of marriage is a beautiful collaboration that they're doing, sponsored by Chase Bank, next month. And they're talking about, I guess, how a discussion on financial planning for Black couples and singles. And these are like, this is the dynamic that we're looking for, right? Where unregulated leaders find each other and do unregulated business. And
I love it.
Yeah.
Where is that gonna? Where's that gonna be at?
It's in person, so it's going to be at the Chase branch on 125th Street. On April 5th. And I think, that I'm glad you brought it up, because so much of being an unregulated leader means in some ways you have to have an unconventional marriage, right? Like there are days where I'm like, I cannot cook. I'm like, I'm on a deadline. I'm so sorry. If it was up to me, these kids would be eating Chipotle and food from a Spanish restaurant probably every night. So I think that's important, because the optics sometimes is like, whoa, Janisha's really doing it all. And it's like, no, Lamar is dope. Like Lamar is on it. He is, a amazing partner, and just having that sort of balance, right? And vice versa, like there are nights where it's like, he may have to edit for 6 hours as a graphic designer, or be working at a project on location, and I'm up, now I'm making meals and doing, the more traditional domestic tasks, which is fine. But I think just like that piece of, you don't have to do it all when you have an amazing partner and you have an amazing team. And that's a huge part of leadership. You have to know what your strengths are, like, there are things that I'm like, I'm not good at that. So I could do it, but it's going to take me 3 hours, versus knowing, oh, that's your strength and you enjoy it. Have at it.
Right. Take it.
That's it. That's, I'm a delegate every time. So
I love that. Is there some space? Because I want to come.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I'll send you the information.
Okay,
and
send me the information.
Will be the week where we'll be doing possibly another prominent Harlem interview. So,
awesome. So maybe we can both at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. Excited.
Thank you so much.
Good to be here.
It was amazing to have you, and thank you for your time and your commitment and all that you do for our youth and community. I feel like there needs to be a part 2, because I had questions about cool kids, and
I know I'm so long-winded. I need to.
No, it was perfect.
No, but it was all good. It was all good. It was so good.
The issue becomes when you've done, a lot of things, is you have to tell me, like, okay, this interview is just about cool kids, or this interview is just about your kids, and like really drive.
But it was all about everything, Janisha. So we didn't want to put you in a box. It's just good, because it does leave us to want to hear more and see of what you're doing and where you'll be a year from now. And we'll do a part 2 of these interviews.
The funniest thing is, I did an interview a couple of years ago, and she was like, what do you want to do in 6 months? And I listened to it, and I was like, wow, I really did that in 6 months. Amazing. So I take these things very seriously now, where okay, what am I saying? What am I putting in the universe? What energy am I projecting?
You are very intentional, and you always have been.
So it'll see. But when I tell you I have no idea, Mary, like I have no idea what I'm doing in the next 6 months. I'm in a very reflective space, because it's been 5 years for Metcalf Consulting. There's been, a lot of opportunities. Cool kids, it'll be 15 years next year. So, I'm not saying I don't know that in a flighty way. I'm just like, wow, what can we do next? Like, what's in an opportunistic way. So I am very excited to see what's coming, and what partners we'll get in the future.
Well, thank you so much for coming. It was so nice meeting you. I can't wait to meet you in person, because I'm coming to your event.
Yes. You live in Harlem? Where do you live?
No, I live in Maryland.
Oh, right. Okay. You did say that. You did say that. Okay. Oh, I love Maryland. Okay.
Yeah. No, but yeah. So thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it. And yes, we're looking forward to part 2 and meeting and interviewing your husband, because it sounds like he's doing some wonderful things too. So
no, he's the Metcalf you want. I'm like, I'm serious. People people think it's me. It really is Lamar.
People go to her because she's pretty much always in the back. He's always in the back.
Right.
He makes things happen, and then she's the voice. So people
Right.
think we go to the person who's talking a lot. But then when I speak to him, I'm just like, if you do not develop a platform, I'm gonna make you a soapbox because
No, that's right.
It's like, you know how Barack was the president, but Michelle was his boss? Like, is that where I'm like, Lamar, how do I do this? Like, you know, that's who you want to interview.
I love it.
So I'm excited for you.
All
right. Well, thank you so much.
Signing off.
Right. Bye.
Bye.